Go. And we are live. Hello and welcome back to another live Tuesday session, and welcome back to Rainwater Research Live. We missed last week's, unfortunately, last week's Stormwater session. We had a number of people out of the office, and unfortunately Dave was away. You were on holiday last week.
I was up in the Lake District enjoying the wet weather, but it was also nice to be up in the hills and have some time away from it all. But back to it now. Glad to be back, and lots to get my.
What did you get up to in the Lake District?
Oh, it was as much as a lot of walking, of course.
Yep.
People don't need to know, but basically, you all know, of course. That's when I say the Lake District. It's the Lake District is a very loose term. We actually went to the Windfell Centre Parks up there. So that was us and my family. So yeah, lots of us in total doing absolutely insane amounts of activities. Badminton, tennis, swimming.
Any golf?
Played golf 4 times.
How many holes?
80. On one day it was 36 holes, and on the other days it was just 18. So it was quite slow pace, not too much.
You say only. I could not imagine me playing 36 holes.
Oh, it's fine.
18 holes is an afternoon for me. Like 36 would be like a 24-hour session golf.
It is 2 rounds of golf, each lasting probably about 3.5 hours to 4 hours, depending on the pace of the course. So it's a good day's event, but it's very enjoyable to get out there and take the course on, and hopefully it doesn't beat you down too hard.
I think I get away with playing like 8 hours of football, but I'd be absolutely knackered afterwards. But I couldn't play 8 rounds of golf. 8 hours worth of golf.
No, I need a more gentleman sport. A bit slower pace. I'm not too sure I could run around about 4 pitch for 8 hours. Goodness me, let alone an hour.
Well, funny you say that. This is just completely off topic. I was watching a video earlier today. So actually, as we know, the football season ended not a weekend, just gone one before that. So it's only been a week and a bit. And Tottenham posted a video on their YouTube channel, and it was all their goals from this league season. And I was watching it thinking, I actually miss watching these lot play. It's only been a week and a bit. But anyway, we digress, and I'll be sat here for hours talking about football. But anyway, we'll get into the main topic of today's Rainwater research session, and that is what are the benefits of rainwater harvesting. As you know, we've talked about rainwater harvesting in general, as it is, for weeks and weeks now, but we've never really dived deep into the benefits that you as a user experience from rainwater harvesting. So David, we'll let you take it away. What are the benefits of putting a rainwater harvesting system in place?
Well, there's quite a lot to discuss, and there's advantages for lots of different people, whether it be a general homeowner living in a small property, or if it could be big commercial applications. I think the most general important thing to remember when we talk about rainwater harvesting is that we're using it as a substitution for mains water in most applications. So when we talk about domestic level, we kind of refer back to, of course, toilet flushing, potentially water being substituted out for the washing machine in the house, as well as the toilets. And then we look at potentially garden irrigation outside cleaning as well. You can then, of course, use these same applications. You can substitute on a much larger commercial scale too. So whether it just be a domestic property or an office building, you can also use it in farming and agriculture. So you then talk about potentially supplementing the rainwater demand used for feeding livestock, for example. When we talk about these much larger applications, you can really see the benefits of rainwater harvesting. So we jump from generally around about a 50% save on demand for the smaller applications to potentially 85 and 90%. So there is huge amounts of potential for substituting mains water with rainwater, which is a free available source. We just got to get some pipe work and some plumbing in place, and arguably a tank to collect that water so we can reuse it at a later date. I think this is something that's just generally not really thought about. But people are very focused on what they want to achieve themselves. I think actually taking a step back and appreciating the larger picture in most cases, there is really huge potential for rainwater harvesting. And this could not obviously be in built-up urban areas, but also out in the countryside where you may not even have access to a mains water network where you can plumb into. In these rare events where you're so far out in the sticks that you're very lucky to be out in the sticks, that you have to basically tap into a possible water source, whether this be from a well, and you're drawing the water up, for example. Of course, again, rainwater can help with you that it can subsidize some of your demand. And even with the standard rainwater harvest system, this could be 50% quite easily. If we then talk about further treatments of that rainwater, we can then substitute other applications in, like showers and baths and sinks, for example. So there is so much scope with rainwater, and it's really not, the potential is not really tapped into at this moment in time. But there's huge scope, certainly into the future, where we discuss on our rainwater CPD. That's, of course, in the larger city areas, we know that they're becoming overpopulated, and that mains water is going to be limited, and we've got to find other ways of basically making up for that shortfall. And rainwater harvesting has got so much potential that we really need to start looking at it for these larger dwellings, building developments, or whatever it may be. All this potential in the future, we need to look at rainwater harvesting in a lot more detail, I think. So rainwater harvesting scope is fantastic.
So when we talk about rainwater harvesting in terms of the benefits, we mentioned there that, especially for domestic purposes, we could save up to 50% of our mains water usage by substituting a rainwater harvesting system. Would that be reflected in terms of water bills, or is that an area where the initial investment could take longer to come back in?
It's an interesting point you bring up. Of course, if we keep the maths relatively straightforward, if we say we can save 50% of your mains water, of course you are going to see that in your potential costs coming out of your mains water bill each month. And again, that could be brought up further if we start treating the water further. So immediately we can see some potential saving on our return. Now, for the smaller domestic applications, of course, we are not saving quite as much rainwater. So the turnaround period for, I'm guessing, clawing some of that money back that you've invested will take a bit more time versus, of course, commercial applications where you're saving probably millions of water each year. That payback return is going to be much, much shorter. So this is where, of course, if you were to step back and think about this in a bit more detail, we start thinking about farmers and how they have these great big farm buildings. I'm sure 99% of them will be using rainwater harvesting in some form or another on their land. And again, being away from that environment, it's just not really thought about, and it really does need to be thought about. There is so much that can potentially be done, not only in helping the planet in terms of reducing our mains water demand, but of course, and the money is costing people, as you said. But of course, the rainwater is so much better for certainly for plants and things that we want to grow. Mains water is typically treated, of course, with various chemicals to make it suitable for human consumption. Rainwater is not. So rainwater on the whole is much better for the environment. So again, another tick box for rainwater harvesting. It really is a fantastic direction for people to start considering and implementing into their designs, their properties, whether it's just be a basic level of just implementing a water butt so they can use it for outside cleaning and irrigation and watering their plants. Maybe implement some sort of pump and actually have an irrigation bed system. I mean, all this stuff can be automated to make things relatively easy for the homeowners. So really is awesome. Rainwater harvesting has got so much potential. There is the other side of rainwater harvesting. We're talking about benefits in terms of mainly the individual person at this moment in time. But of course, with rainwater harvesting, if you think about it commercially as well, we've got problems and things come up in the news, of course, of flash floods and potentially we've got some soil erosion for where we have these floods and lands getting washed away. If we are able to retain some of that flood water within our rainwater harvesting tanks, of course, that's going to slow this release of water into the environment. So a big tick there in terms of how much it can potentially help us. I mean, it's a little bit of a grey area, of course, because with rainwater harvesting, you have a design tank size for the catchment area that you're collecting off of, and you have that water available. I mean, if you have your tank full and you have a very high storm event, of course, that water is not, the space in the tank's not going to be there. But of course, if you did have space in your tank, that's potentially anything from 1,500 litres, that's 1,500 litres, potentially up to, on a domestic dwelling, anything up to like 10,000 litres of water retained within your tank, which you can then use later, then potentially a 3-week or 4-week period. So rainwater harvesting is is awesome in terms of its potential. It really is. There are so many benefits to it. It really is good.
Perfect. I think we've obviously talked through that in quite a lot of detail in terms of the benefits of rainwater harvesting, both on a domestic basis in terms of how much water you can save, what you can use it for, and where your potential monetary savings could be from. And then we've discussed it on a commercial basis, that the scope commercially, I think, is where we could see a lot of savings in. Because like you say, we could dive deep into agriculture, say, take that as an example. So I'm sure that, feeding their troughs with rainwater, washing down vehicles, and that sort of applications can really save a lot of possible water usage by substituting it for rainwater instead. So thank you, David. Thanks for discussing the benefits of rainwater harvesting. Now it's time to talk about the project highlight for this week. And this one, we've got a very interesting topic. Unfortunately, no images, but this one is something we've not seen for years now in terms of...
It's quite rare that we get involved with big project schemes like this. And coincidentally, I think that developers are generally jumping back on the bandwagon and really seeing the advantages and benefits of rainwater harvesting. There was a period when I first started working for this business about 10, 11 years ago, where rainwater harvesting was right at the forefront of people's minds, and it was going into a lot of social housing. Back then, there wasn't a lot of thoughts really going into the servicing and maintenance and the care of those systems there afterwards. So a lot of cheap systems were unfortunately put into place, just basically trying to gain what was given at the time, of course, was points towards how ecologically friendly the properties were going to be. So it was a tick box to gain some credits against the property. But of course, in the time then, it's kind of slowed down now over the last 8 years, but it's kind of picked back up again. I think with this, we've got a much better chance and understanding of how rainwater should be, and we've got much better solutions in place in terms of what we can offer customers. This is only not from a graph perspective, but from all the other different manufacturers of pumps, filters, and tanks as well. And there is a general, I think, appreciation of how worthwhile it is. So referring back to the project discussion of today, it's actually a project down in Maidstone, Kent, where we're currently supplying. So this is an ongoing project for us. 43 platin tank systems with our Eco Plus pump package. So it's completely our own system. And yeah, we've got the platin tank going in. So the advantages, as you know, would know, Callum, this is this tank on the table here. We've got it going to the sites in 4 different sizes. So they've got 43 number individual systems is how I believe it's been set up. So our 1,500 litre, 3,005 and 7,500 litre platin tank. And then with that, we've got our Eco pump package, which is basically a wall-mounted pump where we are drawing water from the underground tank, and that's then feeding the appliances on demand, all automatic for the tenants. And of course, we have the mains water system under the pump internal to the property. So if we do run out of rainwater in the underground tank, we're drawing water from a very small mains water system to supply the appliances until we have our next rainfall period, and of course the tank refills. So really is a very efficient way of utilising as much rainwater as we can and using very little mains water. So a really good solution to be implemented here. And this is one of, I think, many that we're looking at now. We've got another huge project up in Scotland that we're looking at, which is going to be 160 systems. And we had, I think, at the beginning of the year, another project where we had 18 systems go out. So rainwater harvesting, I think, has really been seriously looked at now by many different contractors. And mainly, I think this is more in terms of how rainwater harvesting can help the environment, mainly more so than it's going to be give them some points on some certification. It's implemented for the right reasons, which is important.
Well, like you say, on that, with our Eco Plus systems, they're very not a cheap and cheerful system in order to kind of meet requirements.
No,
it's a very efficient system in terms of maximizing the use of rainwater inside the tank and having a small mains water system below the control panel that really utilizes as much rainwater as possible. It's a very efficient system in terms of using the rainwater, and it's a very smart system in terms of how it works.
Yeah, it really is good. I mean, as I say, in the past, people used to go for basically what we would call a direct mains water top-up system, which is a gravity box feeding the underground tank up with mains water, very small amounts. But of course, we are putting rainwater into our tank, which is taking up rainwater storage volume.
Yeah.
And of course, that mains water backup unit is, it's only topping that underground tank up at a very small pace. So you had to think about the design of the system a bit more in terms of how fast has that water been taken out of the tank? Can the mains water backup unit keep up with the potential demand? So there was a lot more to think about. And that solution being relatively cheap, it was probably the cheapest solution on the market at the moment. When we talk about the Eco Plus system, that's our second most expensive rainwater harvesting system. So again, the customer appreciates and understands why the rainwater harvesting, the benefits of it, and how, and really has to put a solution in which is going to not only fulfill the requirements of the project, but do great things for the tenant moving into that property going forward. So,
because exactly like you say there, it's utilizing that system for that project. Like you say, it's our second most expensive, very efficient product. To implement that into the properties going forward, it's not only meet their requirements in terms of eco-friendliness, but actually providing a solution for the tenant of the property once it's been installed. And is it feeding? Are they going to be used for all type? So when I say all types, is it going to be feeding your toilets, washing machines, and all your external taps, or is it just garden irrigation?
I don't think that they're looking at garden irrigation too much with these tanks. All the property have got an external bib tap where they can connect a hose reel onto, so that they can use it into a watering can and potentially connect up a hose to do some irrigation things around their property. But the main application is back to the property for toilets and washing machine services. So that's the three main things. And of course, the customer can then build on that in terms of how they want to use the rainwater.
Very nice. That's a very nice project that we've supplied recently. And like you say, we are seeing this new trend of kind of going back to how it was, well, probably like what, 8-10 years ago now?
Yeah.
Where, you know, systems are, where systems are being brought in, especially on a mass, on large housing developments, in order so people can really get the use of rainwater harvesting. And we are very much thinking about how our water usage is affecting the environment, and it's a very good step in the right direction, if we do say so ourselves.
Yeah.
Right, so that was the project recap, and I think now it's time to answer all the questions that have come in during today's live stream. So our wonderful assistant behind the screen will just get them up now. The first one that's come in is, why bury a rainwater harvesting tank underground instead of using an above ground tank that could be more easily maintained?
Okay, I think this customer appreciates that an above ground solution is certainly a lot more easier to install, and of course, it's potentially cheaper in terms of its maintenance and servicing going forward. But I think the important thing with there's probably three things I'd like to mention when we talk about underground tanks, and the first thing I think is that we are putting the tank into a more controlled environment. So the tank itself is not subject to UV. I mean, you could put your above ground tank in an area which is not susceptible to sunlight, of course. But of course, being underground, we're going to avoid sunlight directly imposing on the tank. And with UV lights, not only, of course, we have increase in temperature. With these two things, we generally help promote the growth of potentially some microorganisms in the underground tank. So being underground in a dark location, the temperature fluctuations are going to be minimalized. So we are preventing the growth of these microorganisms. But of course, when we talk about above ground tanks versus underground tanks, when we have an above ground tank, that's at floor level, it's going to be located somewhere. We get very decorative water butts these days that some people might make a feature of in their garden. I mean, we do a whole exclusive range of them. But of course, that water butt is also taking up space. With an underground tank, of course, we have the tank fully submerged. We have our relatively discreet cover. I mean, it can be installed in a garden, it can go in a driveway. So that space, which is otherwise potentially used for an above ground tank, of course, is underground, and can be used for applications like potentially parking your car over the top of it. So I think that's something else that is a really big advantage to an underground tank versus above ground tank.
And even though the above ground tank could be from a perspective that could be more easily maintained because it's above ground, that might not necessarily be the case, because with an underground rainwater harvesting system, like we mentioned earlier with the Eco Plus system, that's an external basically control element to the tank, which is more easy to maintain as it is anyway.
Yes. I think it's important for people to consider all options whenever we talk about any sort of solution. I mean, at the end of the day, the customer is paying They're good money to implement a solution. They need to implement a solution which is going to best suit their requirements. So just going online and picking the one that's you think looks the nicest. By all means, please do that. But take a step back. Think about where it needs to go in the garden. What you're going to use it for. Do you want to use it in the winter months of the year? All these sorts of things. You need to properly understand that rainwater solution and what applications you want to use it for. And then, of course, best the one that's going to basically be most suitable, that ticks all your boxes, and then you'll be in a much better position going forwards.
Perfect. I believe that answers that question. Then the next question we have coming in. Is rainwater harvesting illegal?
I certainly hope not. No, it's not. In this country, in the UK, rainwater harvesting is certainly not illegal. I think that's if you were to inquire to the councils, or they'd actually probably encourage you to do rainwater harvesting. So yeah, by all means, go for it. I can't really say much more than that. I think it's probably important to touch on potentially some health and safety things here. I mean, rainwater harvesting directly mains water. Of course, you can't have cross-contamination between rain and mains water. And of course, you need to think about the consumption elements. So we generally encourage people to have labelling to all of their rainwater outlet connections, certainly on an internal system where potentially children might accidentally go to that water source and drink from it. So just something to be aware of, but it's not illegal in this country.
No, there's regulations and rules in place to help safeguard people and make sure it's used in the best way possible, but it's definitely not illegal. I believe that's the case in certain states in the US. Is, I think, illegal to use it. I think that's where most misconceptions come from. Is in the US. There is some states that have made it illegal. They have some weird laws out there, or it's legal and illegal. But anyway, in the UK, it is not illegal, but I think it's come from the misconception that in the US it is.
Yeah, which is obviously if you Google search it, where 99% of the Google traffic comes from. So
yeah, so that's probably why. But you can be safe assured that rainwater harvesting in the UK is not illegal. And that answers that one. So then the next question we have coming in. Can rainwater help? Oh my God. Can rainwater harvesting help in a drought?
Okay, it very much can. Of course, a drought is when we have a very long period without rainfall. So any water we can potentially collect for that drought, of course, is surplus to what they would previously have. So what they didn't have before, they then have that volume of water available. So by all means, rainwater harvesting can then be used in those long periods of that rainfall to help supplement what they would otherwise not have had. So yes.
Perfect. That answers that one. And then the next question we have. Can surface water go into a rainwater harvesting tank?
Okay, this is certainly a frequently asked question. I generally have, again, mixed views on this. I think it's a yes and no answer. So again, I would generally encourage the customer to do a little bit more research into terms of why they want to collect the surface water. I mean, you would look to collect surface water if you didn't have the volume required from the roof area alone to supplement the applications you're looking to use the rainwater, stormwater for. So firstly, do you have the rainwater available from the roof areas alone? If yes, you don't need to consider surface water. If you don't, you can consider surface water, but then you need to think about treating that surface water. Because surface water, whether this be potentially coming from a car park or someone's driveway, you're potentially going to have some mixed fuels and oils potentially coming down those drainage pipes into the tank. And we don't really want that in our underground tank. Not only, of course, to be reused back into the property, but of course, if you're going to use it for irrigation, it's going to go onto your plants. We don't really want that. Of course, if you're looking at potentially collecting water from a pavement area, from your back garden, you're probably going to be slightly safer because you're not going to have the oils and stuff from those vehicles channeling down into your tank. So again, what surface are you collecting from? Is there going to be potential for stuff you not want going into your tank to come into your tank?
Yeah.
So again, take a step back, think about what is the surface going to be used for, how much rainwater you need to potentially harvest before you then start thinking about putting surface water into your rainwater harvesting tank. So yeah, you can do it, but you need to be very careful about those 2 points. So please consider those before you start channeling your surface water into your rainwater harvesting system.
But in general cases, it's usually the case that only roof areas are used for harvesting rainwater.
We would generally encourage roof areas only. It's only when you need the requirements for the additional surface water to come through the rainwater harvesting tank that you potentially ever consider using that water. So yeah.
Perfect. That answers that one. And I believe, have we got any more that have come in? Got a shake of the head. So I believe that's it for this week's Rainwater research session. Thank you once again to David for joining us.
Thank you very much for letting me have you.
And thank you once again for everyone that's taken part and spent some time out of their day to come and join us to talk about all things wonderful about rainwater harvesting. But that is it for this week's session. We'll be back next week for Wastewater Wisdom live, again joined by David. And we hope to see you on the next one. If not, have a great weekend and enjoy the Jubilee.